Hello, and welcome to the Cioffi Brothers Podcast. I'm Ken.
And I'm Alex.
And today we're going to be talking about Reboot the Guardian Code. Now, Reboot the Guardian Code is a show about a group of teenagers who are chosen as next-generation guardians charged with defending cyberspace. Now, you might be asking, why are you guys doing this show as a review? And the reason behind that is that for those of you who are old enough, you may remember the original Reboot show. It was a reboot that came out in 1994 and is technically the first computer-generated television show. All computer animated, and this show actually came out even before Toy Story. So I know Toy Story gets a lot of the accolades for, like, you know, the first foray into computer generation, and it was the first feature-length film done with computer animation. But Reboot was really kind of one of the first ones there on the front lines. The team that did Reboot was called Mainframe Entertainment.
They went on to do one of my favorite series, Transformers Beast Wars.
Beast Wars, right. But even before Reboot, they were in the industry doing some computer animation stuff for a lot of commercials and stuff like that. But most known for before Reboot was the Money for Nothing music video.
Yep.
So, for YouTube it's very, very rudimentary, very, very, well, rudimentary in today's terms, but at the time was cutting edge. So the story goes the way, I think it's Gavin Blair who does all the cons and stuff like that. And it's in the book, The Making of Reboot, which we should probably have displayed here. We'll pause and come back and put that up here in a minute. But the story goes is that they were doing this commercial work. They got drunk in a bar one night and was like, hey, we should do a whole show like this. Now, you got to keep in mind at the time, for them to do just like a small, like 30-second blip was like weeks and weeks of work and render time and stuff like that. And
money for the technology.
But on top of that, the rendering computer, or the render farm or whatever, was very finicky. So if you ever get a chance to watch The Making of Reboot, I don't know if it's on YouTube or if you buy first of all, no, buy the DVD sets because it's worth supporting the show. It's a really good show.
The Reboot Mainframe edition,
definitive edition.
Mainframe edition.
Yeah, it's
worth it.
Absolutely. But anyway, my point being is that they talk about that within. There's a special in there, The Making of Reboot, and they talk about it. But eventually, instead of an idea that was, just, kind of a one-off in a drunken conversation in a bar, the idea stuck with them, and they eventually got to the point where they were able to put together a demo reel and pitch the show of Reboot. And so it ran on ABC. I probably should have had this ahead of time. I'm not sure of the exact years. I know it was like from 94 probably to like 96 on ABC. And then it was canceled by ABC, but it got another third season. It had 2 seasons on ABC, but it actually got a third season in YTV on YTV in Canada that we didn't get here until much later on. I think when it came over on Cartoon Network. And then in 2001...
On their Toonami run. And that's, I think, what resurged interest in the show. And in 2001, they came out with a shortened season 4, which was essentially 2 made-for-TV movies that they broke up into episodes for about 8 episodes of that season 4, which actually ends on a cliffhanger, which we kind of get into some of what's going on here, why we... feel the way we do a little bit about it. But what's unfortunate is that the show did end on a cliffhanger because that last season was actually supposed to be 3 made-for-TV movies and a musical episode. But unfortunately, that last group of that last TV movie or last group of episodes, however you want to classify it, never made it to production, did not get made. So the series itself actually ends on a cliffhanger, and people who are fans of the show always clamor for a resolution of this cliffhanger. So, coming back around for full circle to the Guardian Code, that's where people fans of the show got really excited because Rainmaker Entertainment made an announcement that they were going to be revisiting Reboot. And, of course, hardcore fans were like, okay, are we going to finally get a resolution to this story? And more as, news came out about the show, it became apparent that what this show was not going to be necessarily a direct continuation in that much of a sense, but was going to be kind of something newish.
Going to be...
different.
Reboot.
A reboot, yeah. But a reboot of Reboot. And so that's what we kind of joke, that this episode is about the reboot of Reboot. So, all of that history being laid down, this is a Netflix exclusive show.
First season just launched back in March.
Yeah, March.
And all 10 episodes are available for streaming right now
Netflix
through Netflix.
And I know the first order was for, I believe, 22 episodes.
A lot of the actors are credited for 20 episodes, right?
Yeah, or 20 or 20.
20.
20? Okay.
It's 10-10.
Right. I thought in some of one of the earlier press releases I had seen, I thought it had said 22, but maybe it was only maybe it's down to 20, or maybe it was only 20. Either which way.
Hopefully down to 20.
So this is not typically a kind of show that we would necessarily do a thing on, because I think it's targeted towards a more younger audience, and we're going to take that into account in some of the things that we talk about. And you'll see that later on. I think we're kind of looking at this as a reboot of Reboot. This is a property that we very much enjoy. I grew up, watching. I remember watching the first episode of the first time I ever watched the episode of Reboot there was a preview on Friday night. It might have been a TGIF thing. If for those of you who are old enough to remember TGIF, YouTube it. There was a preview of the Saturday morning cartoons. Again, YouTube what Saturday morning cartoons are, because that's not even a thing anymore.
Not a thing anymore.
It makes me sad. Anyway, so it was a preview of all the Saturday morning cartoons. So they'd show you about just 15 minutes or so of basically all the shows that they were going to show the next morning. But it was to get people interested in it and whatever. And I remember when they showed Reboot, it blew my mind. I remember it so clearly. Watching it and it being so different than anything I had seen before. I remember turning around and looking at Dad and saying, "Dad, how did they do this? Why? How did they make it look like this?" And he said, "I think they do it with computers, bud." So it just, and I think really I would credit Reboot for putting me on the path to my career where I'm at today. Which isn't exactly in computer animation, but definitely in the computer design space. I think very much has a lot of its roots in that first episode of Reboot. But either which way, it's a property we're passionate about. They tried to bring it back, and that's why we're talking about it. Long and the short of it. Probably should have said that up front.
Probably. I got into Reboot when it hit Toonami.
Right.
Because I love Toonami.
Right.
I still do. Cartoon Network.
So, all that being said, let's start with the pros. And Alex, I've been talking a lot. I'll let you take this first one.
One of the biggest pros at this point is the fact that Reboot's back.
Yeah.
It's back. It's not... We'll get into more of it later, but the long and short of it is this franchise that we loved as, that was at the time and is a pretty obscure franchise.
Yeah.
Is back.
Yeah.
And that's hopeful, that brings us joy.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah.
We'd love to see that.
Yeah, I think what's the way I would have the way that I thought of it is that Rainmaker, the company that currently owns the copyright to Reboot, sees Reboot as a viable franchise, a viable property. And that is heartening, because we see it as a viable franchise, as a viable property. We'd love to see more of it. And the fact that somebody's looking at it and saying, hey, this is something that people have interest in, this is something that has value, that's always a good thing. Because there's so many times out there that people, there's a lot of properties out there that, I know that rebooting is very, frowned upon in terms of franchises and stuff like that. But there are a lot of times it's done very well. I think Voltron I think is one that I love, the new Voltron that they did on Netflix. There's a lot of times they go back and revisit properties. The new Blade Runner that they did, that was
phenomenal.
That was really really good.
I do an episode about that.
Yeah, we should do that.
Was phenomenal.
Personally, Tron, I really liked when they came back and did Tron Legacy. That was a really
awesome,
cool,
again,
really
awesome
cool movie. Another franchise that I wish they would revisit. But now that Disney owns Avengers and Star Wars, there's not much of a chance of that happening.
Not much hope in that.
So our beloved franchise is seen as a viable property, and that's always good.
Yes.
So this next one, why don't you take it to start with, and I'll run with it.
Okay. So for those of you who are unaware, the actual show itself uses a particular game engine to render all the CG cutscene, all the CG animation parts.
Right. It's worth stating kind of up front that the show uses both live action and computer animation.
Yes.
So that the kids are live action, and then they boot into the computer, and then they're represented by 3D kind of avatars of themselves. It's like it's very Iron Man-y in the sense that they're kind of like in a suit that protects them within cyberspace, and they even do the Iron Man-y kind of like
heads-up display.
But anyway.
So yeah, all those parts are rendered in a game engine, Unreal.
I believe it's Unreal.
I believe it's on the Unreal 4 engine. Or 3, probably 4.
No, I think it's 4, yeah.
Probably 4 at this point. Which is a very cool idea.
It is a very cool idea.
Because of they have all these 3D assets that they can easily implement into, say, a video game.
Right.
They've done half the work there.
Yep.
And Unreal Engine 4 is a hugely powerful gaming engine.
Game engine, yeah. So one of the things that I've learned in my career is the advantages of what I like to call, and I think was penned by somebody else maybe, but the idea of reusable assets. Within the job that I do, it's really good to be able to have assets that can be used, multi-purpose assets, and this is one of those scenarios. And, one of the things that I was stating is that was a concept even when they were doing the game here. What we have in the background here is Reboot the Game, which was released, I think, in 97. I could be mistaken on that.
Sure.
So I think it was released in 1997.
For the original
PlayStation. And what you'll see here is some in-game footage. We have demo mode going right now, along with all of our Reboot figures here. And what they did is, for the cutscenes of this game, instead of doing an in-game cinematic similar to like Ocarina of Time, they actually pre-rendered animation from the show. But it's not like footage from the show. They did custom animations specifically for this game. Now, what made that much easier and much more possible to do is the fact that they already had these assets available, and they were able to do custom animation and custom renders that they could then put in a quality that could be used within the game. So it's that idea of, hey, we already have these assets, we can use them to put this together. And that's the same concept in terms of using the game engine to render the CG aspects of the show, because now you have 3D assets that are already optimized to work within a game engine.
Yes.
Which means that the conversion of using those assets or creating a video game world with those assets is going to be that much easier. And so in terms of market saturation and creating experiences for end users or creating a full-on game like this, it's going to be that much more faithful to the game, because as you can see, it'll come up again in a minute, the in-game of this had to use low poly assets because the PlayStation obviously is not going to be able to handle full animation style assets.
But, it allows, it means that the assets that are going to be used within that game are going to be extremely faithful, if not 100% one-to-one accurate, to the assets that are being used to animate the show. So that's just, that's a great idea. Like, that's just a really good idea.
In theory.
In theory, right.
Next pro is the voice of Megabyte, who it's not the original voice.
So yeah, let's just a little piece to the late great Tony J, who was the original voice of Megabyte. He died many years ago.
And he did a phenomenal job.
Really is irreplaceable in every sense of the word. He had such an iconic voice. Even if you don't know him as the voice of Megabyte, I believe he was the voice of... wasn't he the voice of the villain in the Hunchback of Notre Dame?
Not 100% sure.
I'm not sure. His voice is so incredibly iconic. If you hear it, even if you don't know who he is, the moment you hear his voice, again, YouTube it, you will hear it and go, oh my god, that's the guy. I know that guy from X, Y, and Z. I was actually just watching an episode of Star Trek the other day, and I was like, that's Tony J. Because he said something, and I was like, that voice, I know that voice. But just such an iconic voice, and unfortunately is no longer with us. There is no replacing him.
But they do a good job.
But
they do a very admirable job at getting someone who not only sounds like Tony J.
I wouldn't say he sounds like him. It's not so much that he's almost like doing an impression of him, but his cadence and the guy's delivery of the lines. Yeah. Every once in a while, I catch myself going, "Wow, that is very similar to that sounds like Megabyte." Yeah. It's not that it sounds like like Tony J, but it sounds like Megabyte. So the fact that this guy must have really been doing his homework, or he's extremely lucky, because the ability to deliver lines in that way that makes you go, "Oh wow," like that sounds right. That's an amazing feat.
Yeah, he did a great job delivering every line in a Megabyte fashion. We've watched 4 seasons of Reboot. We know what Megabyte sounds like and his motivations and how he is, and this guy does a great job
of embodying
portraying Megabyte.
Yeah,
because it's a tough. Big shoes to fill.
Absolutely.
Tough role to follow.
And almost impossibly large shoes to fill. And I will admit, like when I first saw some of the trailers of Reboot the Guardian Code, and I heard they had just one little bit of this guy talking, and he was like invade and infect, I think is what the line was, and I was just like. The voice, I was like, God, could this guy sound any cheesier? Could he sound, like any more generic villain? And I must apologize because he really is, I think, one of the highlights of the show. So I'll let you let's do this last one. And then you have a bit on this there.
They do the last episode in the season is a sort of a special tribute episode to the original. To the original series. Where they tie it into
they try to tie it back
series.
to the original series.
And one of my favorite parts of the original series and of this episode is Hexadecimal.
Right.
Original voice actress.
Yeah, a lot. Any of the original voice actors that they had come back. They had
a lot of the original people come back.
Yeah.
And to have Hexadecimal coming back as just a force. It played out. She plays the part so well, and it's just a great character.
Yeah. Well, Shirley Milner.
Yeah.
Does the voice of Hexadecimal. Kathleen Barr comes back as the voice of Dot, and
it's Cheetor in Beast Wars.
No, that's Glitch Bob.
Glitch Bob
was Cheetor. Michael Beignet is the voice of Bob.
Michael Beignet. Voice of Bob.
The original Bob. And then I don't know the guy who does Glitch Bob's voice. That's not a name that stays at the top of my head.
For some reason, I can't remember.
He did a good job as Glitch Bob. I feel bad because he did an admirable job when Michael Beignet couldn't come back, because I think he was an actor, but he was also a lawyer.
and ended up like he was working when they did season 4 or season 3 and couldn't come back to do the voice of Bob or something like that.
But a lot of the voice actors who come back it's cool to see.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have them back.
So with anything that we do,
all the pros, there's the cons.
There's a lot of cons.
Yeah. If you haven't been able to tell so far, there's something like in general, there was a lot that we weren't happy with. So let's run through these real quick because we got a lot left to cover and we want to make sure that we get to it all.
I mean, pretty much the forced live action segments was kind of unnecessary, and it was very contradictory to the original show that pioneered this CGI technology and this is the first fully CGI TV show, and now like with this new show, it's like, we got this live action, we got this CG. It's like it kind of poo-poo.
Well, the thing that's unfortunate is like the whole concept of in his opening monologue, he said, some say the user lives outside the net and inputs games for pleasure. No one knows for sure, and it's like, well, and then it's just like, well, now we see the user, and
mystery
it's like,
solved.
There's no mystery of that anymore, and that was one of the things that was kind of really interesting about the original, and it's just gone.
Yeah.
So the next one.
The acting is kid quality acting. It's a kids show acting, and it's what you expect from a kids show for that ages.
Yeah.
6 to maybe 13 even.
Yeah. That sounds about right. That's probably the target demo.
Which is the target demographic. Yeah, and that's what you get: the over top, the over exaggeration.
It is. It's the over the top, over exaggerated,
and very very straightforward with a lot of like their way they feel. There's not a lot of subtlety.
No. Yeah, there's not a lot going on beneath the surface there. No.
And that's
it's not necessarily a dig on the kid on their acting. I actually think they do a fine job. But it's just it's very this new style of kids show. Like if you watch stuff on Disney or you watch stuff on Nickelodeon, like it's very over the top. It's very over exaggerated. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what the kids respond to of that age group. But it's just the original reboot was a kids show, but it never felt like it. It never felt like it was that way, and I feel that it holds up. Especially the later seasons hold up in terms of the
first
acting.
2 seasons are a little campy, but the season 3 and season 4 really dig deep and really find a great place for all of the seriousness and whatnot. But we're not talking about that right now.
This next one, the concept of this show, it's been done before, and it's been done better. If you think about Tron, a person who's gets sucked into a computer unknowingly and has to save the world. Digimon, the kids get sucked in the computer and live in the digital world.
Yeah.
Power Rangers, a bunch of kids who are chosen for this greater thing and get all these,
get these
superpowers,
suits and the special powers and all that stuff.
A lot of the stuff is aped off of like Iron Man, and even the music I noticed sometime is very reminiscent of Tron Legacy and the Daft Punk kind of soundtrack,
which is what you would expect from a show about entering a computer.
Yeah, but
it doesn't make it any less.
It's not.
Original.
It's just really not original.
It's just very unoriginal.
And this last one is a big one that we're going to really dive into quite a bit, as much as we can here. This ill-conceived tie-in to the original show. I mean, first and foremost, it does not resolve the cliffhanger. It does not even appear to be connected to that time frame. It looks like it takes place sometime in season 1, right before the Talent Night one. Because in the Talent Night episode is where they redo the Enzo model, so he no longer has the big shoulder pads.
He goes from 0-1 to 1-0.
And the reason they did that was not for a storytelling element, but more so because they needed to change the Enzo model because his really big shoulder pads kept intersecting with his body when they were animating him. So they were like, well, our fans are smart fans. They're going to notice this if we change it. let's come up with a story element that explains why we're changing this model, which I think is a really was a really cool thing.
Did not know that.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
Part.
Yeah, so and the reason why I place it there is because that's the Enzo model that they use has that kind of style. The glitch that Bob has is glitch 1.0 before it gets upgraded at the end of season 4. All these like super nerdy things that are apropos of nothing except for the fact that it helps us place where these characters are coming from in the timeline. That's all. And first iteration of Hexadecimal, because Hexadecimal goes through a couple permutations.
She goes through a couple different.
There's Hex as just first Hex. Then there's Hex after she got blown up and repaired by Megabyte, and then Hex after she gets her face fixed by Bob.
Yeah, and then.
And then
Sprite version.
And then Sprite. So, yeah, and then Sprite Hex. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And Sprite
and
Hex.
Then she ends up going back to. Long story short.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about the 10th episode that we kind of brushed over.
This in and of itself has a list of pros and cons that we want to kind of talk about, which is it's just in looking at this show as a reboot of Reboot and revisiting these characters, the fact they did a whole episode on it, there's a lot of things that as fans of the original, like we really needed to process. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I guess, but we'll start with the pros as we do with everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing is seeing Mainframe again.
Yeah.
Is really cool.
Yeah.
In
HD.
In HD, seeing the old characters, and we even got to see
a game.
A game,
and it was
game.
a throwback to a game that was in an episode, the Tiff, the original episode. Called Starship Alcatraz.
Yep.
And they rebooted, and he had the same costume, the same, it's the same concept.
Pretty much the same everything with it.
Except for the fact, in this show, this episode, they were able to use the gun to destroy the enemy. In the original episode, ABC's boards of standards and practices came in and told them that they were not allowed to well, I don't know if they actually told them that, but either which way, they were not allowed to destroy them, and their guns basically shot out bubbles that captured the bad guys, and they floated around. So I just thought that was a little funny thing.
Right. And I love the concept within the episode, within the game. They used cheat codes. The users that are the new Guardians were in the game, and they used a cheat code because they're users. They knew
the cheat code, and I thought it was a shame that if this is something that could have been brought into the original show, this concept of that there is a cheat code, or that there is a way to win the game more easily for the characters of Mainframe. I just feel like that's something that could have been explored and they could have had a lot of fun with that in the original show. They never got there because because of any number of things, or maybe they just decided not to address it. But that could have been something that they could have had a lot of fun with, and I thought it was a cool concept to bring into it, because I just never thought of it before. Like, oh, well, yeah, there's cheat codes in games.
Just cheat.
Yeah. And they do. I guess they do kind of make a joke about it in the one episode with Bob, Bob and Matrix.
Yeah.
When they're playing Patsu Heavy X. And he says, "You're a renegade, cheat." But either which way, I thought it was a cool concept.
All right.
So the cons. The biggest con of this episode is that the whole thing feels like a real slap in the face to fans of the original. So yeah, like I was saying, the neckbeard thing is really not a dig on the guy. They're purposely trying to make him look that way. I'm not trying to make a dig on the guy.
They're trying to make him look like a 40-year-old loser.
They make him. He makes a comment about living in mom's basement. Basically he's he's got an old man, neck-bearded mama's boy. He's got bald on the top with the ponytail.
With the neck beard, with the greasy hair.
And they make him look like this hardcore. Like they have this. They're trying to make him portray him as a hardcore Reboot fan, but they make him look like this, and you can't you can't help but interpret this as a dig toward the fans of the original series who were vocally critical online about the concept of the new show because they didn't like it. You know, it didn't seem like it was true to the spirit of the original, and you know, whether I agree with that or not, this it's really hard to interpret this as anything but a dig at those types of fans.
Oh yeah, it's a slap in the face for the original fans who waited so long for a resolution to a beloved show, only to find that there's not going to be a resolution.
No,
there's going to be what we wanted it.
Yeah, like we're doing, it's our property, we're doing what we want with it. We're gonna, you know, you can tell that they were like, oh, we're gonna throw you a bone here by including these characters, but you know, by doing that, we're gonna also, you know, jab you with it, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so next one here.
This is yours.
Yeah. So the throwback out of whack. They tried to do like a throwbacky tone and capture the cheekiness or the campiness of the original, but it just didn't. It wasn't successful. You know, I think the examples I used that were really better captures of that is there was a season 3 episode called Number 7. That plays around with this concept of throwing back to the style of the original, you know, the first 2 seasons of Reboot and how it was a little bit, you know, maybe targeted at a younger audience and a little campy. And then the first couple of minutes of My Two Bobs kind of plays around with that a little bit too. But it was really more lighthearted. You could tell there was more love there for the original and for the people who were going to be viewing it. Whereas this just really felt like
hey, you've been asking for this.
Like poor fan service. You know, like not done well. Like, just here, shut up now. You know, like that. That's really what it felt like.
Yep. This is something again you had noticed.
Actually, I didn't notice. This is something that was pointed out to me online. Not the first part, but the second part definitely was pointed out.
Okay, yeah. So Dot is portrayed in this throwback episode as kind of a damsel in distress, and
she's hardly portrayed at all. But when she is, she's just like this helpless little, oh, Bob, you know, like
And if you've watched the original show, you know
Dot is a badass,
and Dot's like a hardcore BA, like awesome character, so well developed, and really takes a huge role within the second season.
Yeah,
when just as the story moves forward, I won't spoil it.
Yeah, second kind of more the third season, but second season a little bit too. Yeah.
From the second season to the third season, there's a huge transformation in the character.
Yeah,
and it's a huge but still in the first season, she's still a strong female character that you can
she was equal with Bob.
Yeah.
Her and Bob were equals. They had different strengths, and no more prominently displayed than in the episode The Tiff, which has Starship Alcatraz, which really exemplifies the fact that they have different approaches to things, but you know, sometimes one approach works better and sometimes the other one does. But either which way, it was Dot it's being portrayed as a damsel instead of, you know, an equal and peer to Bob. And there's a point in the episode where she uses Enzo as a shield. Like, there's like a thing that it crashes down and she grabs him and like holds him in front of her. And like, I think it was supposed to be like her like trying to like pull him out of danger, but the way they animated it was like,
it does look like that.
Wow. But anyway, this next one, you can take this next one.
Towards the end of the episode, they do this kind of lame passing of the torch sort of thing. Like really, really, really lame. It's Dot who says it. Yep. Well, at least we know.
It looks like cyberspace is in good hands.
And then it's like they fly, like the camera flies off, and they're like, you know, and it's like Bob and Dot and Enzo just kind of standing there,
like, you guys are gonna do all right. We'll just stay here, you know.
Yeah.
and it just was
lame.
It was just
It
it
was
was
lame.
bad. It was bad. And then this last one is the character models. And this is what was really unfortunate, is that it was very apparent to me that they were going to spend a lot more. Like, the way the episode goes is that basically Megabyte is going back to Mainframe to get Hexadecimal because he needs her help for his next big plan or whatever. It's not important.
Because technically the Megabyte is the original
The original Megabyte has been upgraded.
Who's been upgraded.
So he goes back to get Hexadecimal, and you can tell that they had plans to use her after this episode, and they did not have plans to use Bob, Dot, and Enzo after this episode. Oh, you know, another thing I didn't mention, and I'll just kind of throw this out there, is that there were no binomes in all of Mainframe. The only characters in the entire city was Bob, Dot, and Enzo and Hexadecimal. But anyway, I digress. Because of the fact that her character model was so much more developed, and then you get to Bob, Dot, and Enzo, and they just look messed up. They look like the action figure versions of them, as opposed to, and there's nothing wrong with the action figure versions of them because they were made during the time
of them in like 1992 and 1993.
Yeah,
it's 2018.
Yeah, and you wouldn't, 3D scan this and try to use this as the character model, but that's what it looks like. Actually, the better example that I had when I first saw the episode is it looks like when you go into an MMO and you go into the character creator and they have those like kind of default faces that that you can like cycle through in terms of like the mapping on the face, and like they just took that, turned it blue, messed with the facial things a little bit, gave him silver hair, and like, hey, look, it's Bob.
Yeah.
And it's just really poorly done. Doesn't really look like Bob, other than the fact that the costume is his. It doesn't look like Dot. It doesn't look like Enzo. They just don't look like themselves. And they're just pale imitations of themselves. So we do have a couple of screenshots here that we'll throw up so that you guys can see them. And the first one we're looking at here is Hexadecimal. Now you can see she looks very Season 1 Hexadecimal. The amount of detail they put into her. I mean, she looks good. Her face is a little rounder than I remember personally.
Yeah, but I think that's because they're doing her gimmick a little bit differently.
Yes, yeah. But Hexadecimal looks great. Shirley Milner does the voice and sounds awesome. Sounds she just, I've seen videos online of her, going to cons and doing the voice, and it's just awesome every time.
She captures the crazy. I don't know what it is.
So we're looking here at Enzo, and again, like his face just seems like vacuum formed a little bit.
It looks like a crash test dummy.
A little bit, yeah. His hair is just, and I'm being a little nitpicky there, but the hair just looks weird. It just doesn't look like him. It's look like they're trying to make it look like him, but it does not. Dot other than the costume and the green skin, the face doesn't look anything like her.
No,
it doesn't look like her at all.
Nope.
And then Bob just, again, we were kind of already touched upon Bob. He just looks wrong. It doesn't look like him at all. The hair's not even silver. It's kind of more black, really.
Again, a lot of it looks like they did this episode as a, all right, stop complaining that your old reboot isn't back.
Yeah.
We're just going to throw some stuff together. And
look, here's your guys. Here you got. You got them. And the other thing I read online, so I don't know if there's any truth to this,
is Sanic.
Here's Sanic, yeah. With the knuckles, who's all like, oh god, I love that.
But that's what we're looking at. That's what
it does kind of feel like it. That is what it feels like. I was reading online that apparently there are people on Reddit and stuff like that talking about the behind the scenes of that, and I don't want to get into that too much because it's a little bit of rumor. But one of the things that they were saying is that they were having a hard time with lighting on the show, and that I feel is really apparent, especially in this episode, because Mainframe itself looks very dark.
Yes.
It very much looks like the episode's taking place at night, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but if the rumors, were, proven to be true, it would certainly explain why the episode is so dark, but either way. So here, we didn't do this with all the characters, but we felt it was worth doing with Bob because of, we just felt it would help as a comparison. So here we have season 1 Bob, and he's season 1 Bob. He's characterized by the earlier models had a detached separate face part of the model. The eyebrow or the eyelids were separate pieces, and the ears were separate pieces from the neck. So you actually have many pieces of the model for the face, and that's just something I've noticed from watching the show for many years. So now here we have the season 3 version of Bob, and you'll see that he's been upgraded all around. All the models in season 3 got an upgrade, and basically what it came down to is they got better at the animation of it. So they merged
in different places. They
merged. So they've merged the eyelids into the face. They've merged the ears into the face, and the face is connected to the neck as opposed to being a separate piece. Yeah. And then the season 4 version of Bob, which is, it's just even more upgraded. It's a little bit more reflective of the technology of the time. It's just a new version of Bob.
And it can be sometimes hard to see in a still. You'd have to really go back and watch the episodes, because you can see the difference in the animation quality.
You can.
Moving forward.
And it's just really an evolution thing more so than anything. It's not even it's not even that the season 1 version, personally, I don't think it looks bad. It's just an earlier version.
No.
So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, who the hell are these guys to be ripping on the show? These guys, like they could do any better. I don't want to say we could do any better, but we tried. And right here, what we have up on the screen is my version of Bob. Like I said, I love Reboot. I love the show. I've always had a passion for it. It's the reason why I got into, a lot of the things that I got into. And I've always, wanted to play around with 3D animation. That being said, I'm an amateur 3D animator. And I took a stab at Bob. Now, I'm not trying to say that my Bob is all that good. All I'm trying to say is that, as an amateur, I think my version comes much closer than the version that was put up on screen. And that makes me wonder.
You gotta preface this, because, 1, you have a full-time job.
Yes.
You have a child.
Yes.
You have a house.
Yes.
You have all of these things, and you were doing this in your spare time.
In my spare time, yeah, absolutely.
And it took
Thank you for putting
it took about a month.
It's, in fits and spurts. Yeah, if you wanted to compile it all together, about a month.
About a month.
Yeah.
And this is what you came up with in a month.
Right.
And these people who have been doing Reboot Guardian Code have been doing this for the past, 3 or 4 years, trying to...
Right, and they're, professionally, presumably professionally trained. Yeah.
Professionally trained.
And it's not like they're not capable of creating good character models, because they have for the other characters in the show. So, I call my Bob version, I call him season 2.5, because while everything else is connected, the ears are still separate pieces. Because I was having trouble getting that, and I said at a certain point, forget it. It's not worth screwing around with. It's close enough for my purposes.
Yeah.
And again, so another piece that I do just want to kind of throw in there is I also do have some experience with importing models into game engines. So and without a lack of without a quality loss. So my point is that, if an amateur can create a semi-decent looking character model and has a pretty good idea of how to transfer that character model into a 3D animation or 3D game engine without any quality loss, that's why let's put it this way, that's why I get so frustrated as to the version that we saw. Let's put it that way. That's a better way to put it, and I think a fairer way to put it.
Yes.
Without digging on the people who work on the show as much. That's why I have frustration. So let's we've been rambling on quite a bit here, and let's try to bring things to a close. And we'll talk about the grades, and I'll go first, because I do want to preface this, and I think it's the same preface that you're going to apply to this as well. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to grade this as a reboot of Reboot and not as Reboot the Guardian Code on its own. Because the Guardian Code on its own, as a kid's show, as what it is set out to do, is not bad. It's not a bad show. It's exactly what it is trying to be. It's
equated to something you would see with Power Rangers.
Yeah.
It's Power Rangers.
Yeah, it is. It is. And in all fairness, the acting and the concept of the show and a lot of the parts of the show are better than the Power Rangers that I watched as a kid and was very much invested in. So I'm not grading it by that standard. I am grading it as a reboot of Reboot, and as a reboot of Reboot, I think this is a first for us. I give it a failing grade. It's not what we as fans want. Fans of the original want. Let me put it to this way: if you were to do this show and just stick a different name on it, I would have nothing to say about it because I wouldn't have watched it. I wouldn't be interested in it.
We wouldn't have been here right now.
We wouldn't be here reviewing it because it's not targeted at us. We're not the target demographic, and that's fine. That's A-okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But to try to capitalize on the nostalgia of the original show and the name brand recognition of the original show, and then not do anything that relates to the original show.
And the little that you do to relate to the show is a slap in the face.
The little that is done is done in such a
slapdash way.
I'm trying to find the right term, but such a disingenuous way is what's really unfortunate, because I think there was a lot of potential here. I think some of the pros that we touched upon, there was a lot of potential that could have been done. You could have done this as a reboot and still tied back to the original, and not tread on what came before. I mean, look at the new Star Trek series, the not the new TV show Discovery, but the movie series that was basically a reboot, but was connected back to the original by using the original Spock and saying this is a different timeline. There was a way that this show could have been done as something new, but still had a little bit kickback to fans of the original. That would have satisfied everyone.
Yeah,
and this did not do that.
Can see, and we could go on forever with examples that have
successfully done what we would like to have seen.
Most recently, God of War, which I've been playing through. But to my grade of the show, again, going back to what we were saying earlier with the fact that we're looking at this as a reboot of Reboot.
Right.
With that in mind, this show gets an F. It really just it hurt. It hurt right here.
And I feel bad. I honestly feel bad giving it that grade because I really want to emphasize and reiterate that this has nothing to do with the quality that the people who are acting on the show and working on the show are putting into it. Because I honestly don't think, as a kid's show, it's bad. I mean, as a kid's show, it's fairly interesting. I mean, if I didn't go into it saying what I wanted it to be, I would potentially have graded it differently, just as its own show.
As a kid's show, and I watched through. We both watched through the entire season. And I watch a lot of different shows, mm-hmm. and I'm very I'm very nostalgic for a lot of my older shows, older seasons, Digimon and stuff like that. Going into it, even if it wasn't a reboot, it probably would have gotten like a D+, C- sort of thing from me.
I would have even said and this is just off the cuff, I would even say C+ or B, because I think there's some interesting concepts there. I think, like I said, the acting is kids acting. It's not bad. They're not doing a bad job. I really don't think they're doing a bad job. I just think, like kind of as we've said over and over again, is going into it,
this is not the reboot you remember.
It's just not Reboot. It's Reboot in name only, and nothing else. I think that's the best way to put it. It's Reboot in name only, and the Guardian icon. But aside from that, and Megabyte, it really has nothing to do in concept. I mean, there's no games. There's really no...
There's no binomes. There's no...
There are binomes. There are binomes. They're just not the binomes that we remember. But there's no interaction with any of these cyber people. It's more about the kids doing things in cyberspace than interacting with the characters and the potential people. I mean, there's no cyber characters other than the Vera character. There's no people from the computer that they're interacting with and talking to at all.
No Crimson Binome.
Well, actually, Crimson Binome can't be a character because the guy who did the voice of him, Long John Baldry, I think is what they called him. He passed away. He actually passed away before season 4.
Before season 4.
Yeah, that's why there's actually a little nod to him when they get to the wedding. There's a bunch of the pirates, and they go, "Hey, look, the captain's over there." So that's the only little nod. But anyway, that is sad. But the point being, basically, that there was potential for characters within cyberspace, and to have these kids get but either which way, my point is that there are ways that they could have brought more concepts from the original into the new, while still having what they have there. They could have had their cake and eat it too, and made everybody happy. But instead, they kind of just wanted to do what they wanted to do, which is fine because it's their intellectual property and they can do whatever the heck they want with it. But if you're trying to use the name to attract old fans, and you're not going to do,
it just kind of sucks for fans.
And you're not going to do anything to actually
then just leave
them.
just leave then just leave everything old out and just
make it a new show. Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely not, like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a fine show. It's a fine concept on its own. But as a as a continuation of Reboot, as a reboot of Reboot, I feel like it misses the mark.
Yeah. So I think we've
we've beat
enough.
This horse.
If you don't know, we don't like the show, and we love the original. But thank you for sticking around with us, watching, subscribe,
yes,
share.
Please always like, subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff.
And we'll see you next time.
I come from the net, through systems, peoples, and cities, to this place, Mainframe. My format, Guardian, to mend and defend